Unit 1, Lesson 2. Evaluate numerical expressions. To evaluate an expression means to find its value. We evaluate by using the order of operations, or PEMDAS. Parentheses, which is all grouping symbols. Parentheses, brackets, braces, and absolute value. Exponents, multiplication and division. And remember, this is always performed from left to right. Addition and subtraction. And again, remember, this is always performed from left to right. Evaluate each expression. As I look at letter A, I see 3 plus 42 times 2 minus 5. Following PEMDAS, the first operation I must do is multiplication. I'm going to continue to show my work neatly down the page and only do the multiplication first. 42 times 2 is 84. Again, showing the rest of the steps. Then if I continue through PEMDAS, my next operations are addition and subtraction. If I perform those from left to right, I get 87 minus 5, which then becomes 82. Again, I'm finished showing my work neatly down the page. Looking at letter B, I see many operations. Absolute value, which is considered parentheses, subtraction, exponents, and division. I must first start with grouping symbols, parentheses. Within the absolute values, I then see subtraction and a square. So I'm going to do the square first, the exponent first. I'm going to continue to show my work down the page, leaving anything that I do not use. 5 squared means 5 times 5, which is 25. Staying within the absolute values, 10 minus 25 will give us a negative 15. So I'm going to again write the absolute values, negative 15 divided by 5. Again, showing my work down the page. The absolute value of negative 15 means that it is 15 place values from 0 divided by 5. And our final answer will be 3. Problem letter C. Negative 4 squared plus 24 divided by 3 times 2. There are no parentheses or grouping symbols, so I'm going to move right to exponents. This exponent is telling us 4 squared. So showing my work down the page, there's no parentheses here, so that negative still stays out front. 4 squared is 16 plus 24 divided by 3 times 2, again showing every step down the page. If I look through, I have the negative sign, an addition, division, and multiplication. So going left to right, my next step must be 24 divided by 3. Negative 16 plus 8 times 2. My next step is multiplication. So negative 16 plus 8 times 2 is 16. My final answer here would be negative 16 plus 16 is 0. Letter D. Letter D gives us the opportunity to see grouping symbols in the same problem. When this happens, we must always start within the inside-most set. So in this case, we're going to look right to 36 divided by 6. Again, showing my work down the page and showing everything that we've not yet used. 36 divided by 6 is 6. I no longer need that set of parentheses because I've already done the only things required inside. If I continue down the page now, within the next set of grouping symbols, the brackets is 5 squared plus 6. Again, I must do exponents first. 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. Continuing down the page, within the brackets gives us 31. And 2 times 31 gives us 62. There's no operations left to perform, so we are done. Letter E is another opportunity for us to see one large fraction. Within each, the numerator and the denominator, those act as though they are also surrounded by grouping symbols, even though we cannot see them. The first thing we can do then, since there are no parentheses, would be to evaluate any exponents. At this time, I'm starting to feel comfortable, and therefore I'm going to do 2 steps at once. 7 plus 3 squared is 3 times 3, which gives us 9, and that completes my numerator. In the denominator, in the same step, I'm going to do 4 squared, which is 4 times 4, which gets us 16 times 2 as the denominator. Again, showing my work clearly and neatly down the page. The next step I must do is multiplication. I'm going to do 7 plus 9 in the numerator, and in the denominator I will get 32. My next step down the page is going to be the addition. Again, I must do everything in the numerator and the denominator acting as though there were parentheses there. 16 divided by 32. If I reduce that, 16 goes into itself one time. 16 goes into 32 twice. My final answer is 1/2, or 0.5. Letter F gives us the opportunity to see within the parentheses a negative number. There is nothing to do in those parentheses, so we must come outside. The next step is exponents. This case, I'm being asked to say, what is -3 squared, or -3 times -3? We will get a +9. Again, I'm going to show the rest of the problem across the page and then work down the page. I now see the division sign. I have -27 divided by -3. That's going to give us a +9, and I'm going to keep everything else working down the page. 9 plus 9 will then give us 18 plus 7. And again, there's an opportunity where you could skip a step, and we get to 25. Please take the next couple of moments to work out letters G, H, and I. Remember, follow PEMDAS always. Page 2. Evaluate algebraic expressions. To evaluate an algebraic expression, replace the variables with each of their given values. Then follow the order of operations like we did on the front side of this page. Letter A. Evaluate each expression. X squared plus 4x if x equals -3. First thing I notice is that x is a negative number. Therefore, whenever I plug in x, I'm going to use parentheses to make sure that negative stays strong. Instead of x squared, I'm going to write -3 every time I see that x. So there's -3 in parentheses squared plus 4 times x. But remember, x is now -3. Now I'm going to continue following the order of operations. There's nothing to do within the parentheses, so I'm going to skip right to exponents. -3 squared gives us a +9 plus 4 times -3. Again, I'm going to show my work down the page. According to PEMDAS, my next choice then is multiplication. I have 9 plus 4 times -3 gives us a -12. I'm going to show parentheses here because I have the addition and negative sign together. I must clean them up with parentheses. Maybe I think one more step now. When I add a negative, I am really just subtracting. So now I have 9 minus 12, which gives us a -3. There are no operations left, so again, we are finished. Letter B. This time, A equals 4. So again, I'm going to read through the expression, and every time I see an A, I'm going to substitute in a 4. I continue to show every part of the problem. I'm using parentheses around my A value, again to make sure I don't forget what it is I am substituting in. Now we can move on to the numerical expression portion, which means I'm just following PEMDAS. There's nothing to do within the parentheses, so I'm then going to continue to exponents. 4 squared is 16. My next step then is multiplication. I'm going to again leave everything else the same unless I'm actually using the numbers or the variables or the operations that I'm showing. 7 times 4 is 28. Again, working my way down the page. If I have addition and subtraction again at the same time, I must perform those no matter which one comes first from left to right. -16 plus 28 will give us a +12 minus 2. Our final answer with no operations left is 10. As you're working down the page, every problem gets a little bit harder. Letter C is the first example where we're now going to substitute in 2 different values for 2 different letters. The rules don't change. Every time you see an N this time, we're going to plug in a -5. Every time you see a P this time, you're going to plug in the number 2. So showing my work down the page, I see 2 times N squared. So again, I'm going to use parentheses, and this time is -5. Close the parentheses, squared. I see a grouping symbol now of parentheses. Inside is 3 minus 5 times p. But again, I don't want to use p. I want to use the value that p is. Again, closing all the parentheses. Now that we have substituted in any algebraic variables, we can now go ahead and follow PEMDAS. So within PEMDAS, I need to follow parentheses. I see a group of parentheses several times. The only one is the second portion that I could do something in. So I'm going to continue to show my work down the page. This time within the parentheses, I see subtraction and multiplication. I must do the multiplication first. 5 times 2 is 10. I'm going to eliminate the ones that have parentheses and work out. Moving down the page, I still see something that can be done in the parentheses. 3 minus 7 is -10. Now that I'm finished doing anything within the parentheses, I will move on to exponents. I see 2 times -5 squared. -5 squared means -5 times -5, which gives us 25. And again, showing my work down the page, we are now having 3 sets of multiplication. So I'm just going to go left to right. 2 times 25 will give us 50, and we're now going to multiply by -7. 50 times -7 is -350. Since there are no operations left, I am finished. Letter D. This time I have x, y, and z all equal to numerical values. So I'm going to start by replacing anytime I see x, y, and z with the values that they are worth. Instead of x, I'm going to replace it with a 4. Instead of y, I'm going to replace it with a 5. And instead of z, I'm going to replace it with a 3. Again, keeping parentheses neatly down the page. Now I'm going to continue with PEMDAS. Within the parentheses, I see that I have an exponent. I'm going to do that first. 3 cubed is 27. I still have work to do within the parentheses, so I'm going to continue to show all of my work down the page. 2 times 5 is 10. There are portions here where I could have skipped that step and added right away 10 to 27. If you're comfortable, please do that. Outside of then parentheses, there's nothing left to do in, so I'm going to move to exponents. I have 3 times 4 squared, which is 16, plus 27. Now I have multiplication and addition. 3 times 16 is 48, plus 27 will give us 75. Again, I am finished. Please take a few moments to try letter E and F on your own. Good luck.